your goals, what you're passionate about. Maybe you want to have a brewery on your farm someday. Think about how that can fit in. Try to be visionary. When you're deciding to make purchases, you need to be strategic. Debt can be a very powerful tool for growing your business more quickly. It can also be your undoing. So you need to be very careful how you plan the repayment and how that repayment is planned based on what you spent the money you took a loan for and how that expenditure will give more money back to your farm. Put a picture there of most people's favorite farm toy, the tractor, which that particular tractor was the bane of my existence because it broke down all the time. It was a poor decision. Every time it broke, it was $1,000. The final time it broke, it was $5,000. And I didn't fix it. I traded it away. So, how many of you out here have education as an accountant? Wow, right. There's some community assets that you need to take advantage of. Having a farm accountant is absolutely critical because your goal as a food producer, in most cases, is focused more towards the entrepreneurial and the technician. You're going to be passionate about the food and the vision you have for your farm. Finding someone who can manage your books, not only recording the information, but analyzing it and helping you understand it is very important. So, with the planning for your future, this is a very important part of your accountant's job, and I'll leave most of that to something that you can sort out with your accountant. But if you have a well set up chart of accounts, you can keep an eye at any point in time on how much your tax liability can be, because that's very important. If you get to the end of the year and you think you made some money, maybe you didn't because you owed all the government. So be very careful with how you plan that out. So to talk a little bit about development of the farm, I want to have this basic definition of how I try to look at the farm. This is what I want the farm to be for me. And it is much more than some fields or some pastures with some crops and some animals. What I have done with our farm business is I started out growing vegetables. My wife liked making bread. We had bread and vegetables. We went to the marketplace. We saw what was demanded. We looked at our own interests. Now on the bakery side, that has turned into something where we have bread, we have pastries, we have crackers, we have granola, we have bagels, a large range of different products that we can produce, integrate with farm products. And that's where the restaurant started. So I have a way to sell even more products. Right now, today, I have a farm-to-table restaurant, open 6 days a week. Got a liquor license. I can sell any type of vegetable I can produce. Eggs. I'm looking at getting back into the meat business so that I can produce the protein products I need to serve in my restaurant. All avenues where I now can control the sales from my farm, and I also make profit selling it at the restaurant. The beauty of the farm is you're allowed to have multiple chains of revenue off your product if you continue adding value to it before the consumer gets it. Canned goods are fantastic, much underutilized way to sell product from your farm. I know a farmer near me that he just told me 2 weeks ago, last year he cleared $150,000 at farmers markets from pickled goods that he produces at his farm. And that has surpassed the amount of actual fresh produce he sells. Wow. So, yeah.
What type of product? Pickles and what else?
He does pickled asparagus, regular pickles, dilly beans, different types of kraut. You name it. If you can pickle it and preserve it, he's doing it. I don't think he does that much okra because we're over the farm.
Does he do that on his own land? He does all that already?
Yes. Yes. That's part of the farm plan, where those different enterprises can fit into the farm. You need a candy kitchen. In my case, I need a bakery. I need a prep kitchen. I now do catering events. And all those different things that you can add to your operation make an incredible amount of money. And while you're doing that, it's very important because what I'm doing is I'm making that farm more valuable. One of my inspirations after my father lost the family farm is that I want to preserve farmland. The best way I can see doing that is by making my farmland valuable. What you see behind you is a plot of land where it's a 55 by 70 foot garden that produces me about $1,000 a week throughout the entire growing season. And that is just by producing highly intensive, productive crops.
Is that covered under your roof?
No, that's just out open farmland. So obviously when it, well, I do even harvest that after it snows and when it's...
You have a fence around it, or just fence?
No, this is not fenced in. Pest control is another fantastic topic, but that particular plot has 80,000 tourists visiting it, and that tends to scare the deer away. So building value in the dirt. One way that you can sell the value of your land, if you have conservation districts around here, I don't know if you do, that you can work with. A way of making your farmland more affordable to you when you purchase land is actually to sell the development rights for it. So you can commit that land to being in agricultural production in perpetuity. The beauty of that is oftentimes there is funding sources where you can get paid for getting rid of those development rights. And that can help add to your ability to purchase farmland.
What is
I
that?
don't understand that.
What is that?
Break it down a little more.
Okay, basically, you're going to get a permanent easement on your land that says it cannot be turned into a development for housing. It cannot be turned into development for other business, and it will be used for farmland. And sometimes the restrictions will be how many even farm buildings you can build on it, but it's trying to create more permanent farmland. And there will be programs that will pay you for those rights. So essentially, if your land is worth $20,000 an acre to a developer because he can buy it, sum it up, and build houses on it, and then resell it to make profit, that's where a certain amount of that $20,000 per acre value comes from. But if it was only farmland and you weren't allowed to build houses on it, it might only be worth $10,000 an acre. There are programs available where they could say, look, if you get rid of that development right to build houses on that land, it's worth $10,000 an acre. Now these are just made up easy numbers, but the general concept is that you can then get money paid to you to permanently preserve that farmland as farmland.
And this is farmland.
Yes, you can farm it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the whole point, which is beautiful for anybody who wants to have a farm. You know, if your plan is to farm the land and then build a subdivision there, it won't work. But I don't think that's anybody's plan.
What is that vegetable though?
Fingerling potatoes. I grow those potatoes because they sell for $5 a pound, which is a good price for potatoes.
What kind is that?
Rose fin apple. That's my favorite variety and also is one of the best keeping of the fingerlings. So when you're developing this farm business plan, I want to just run through a couple of quick slides here. Always think outside the box. Try to be visionary with what you're doing. I got into farming from a farming background with no farming education, but the farm that I grew up on really had very little to do with what I have in production now. We were not growing and selling vegetables. I decided to look at all the aspects of what I had going on, do as much research as I could, visit with other farmers, see what they were doing, take tours around the country so I could visit farms in other productive parts of the world. I was even able to get a trip for 2 weeks to New Zealand to tour farms there. And there are opportunities out there if you keep your eyes peeled for these educational opportunities. And that's where you can get ideas. And then bring them back and see how they can fit into your own production system. Different crops that I've produced. I actually grow and produce mushrooms. It's another specialty crop. There isn't a whole lot of competition in the market. People will pay premium prices for good fresh mushrooms. And it's another way that I can add diversity and value to my farm.
Is
harvest it and pack it and send it out in a quick, timely, and temperature-controlled way. This is a quick shot from my packing room, where that entire area is actually refrigerated. So that when I bring my products in from the field, they are immediately dropping down in temperature. I wash them in cold water, and I work, and I pack, and I bag in a 35-degree room, so that everything is cold. It preserves the quality, it preserves the freshness. I'm not sure exactly how that's pronounced, but this is what they call a CSA in Japan. And the model and the idea behind it is community. And it's amazing to see how that works. And it might be something that can work on your farm. The idea is that your CSA members are actually more part of your farm than you could ever imagine. They're embraced as almost family members. They come and they work on the farm. They share the good times on the farm. And even in Japan, when there were the tsunami and all that kind of disaster, the CSA members are the ones who came out to the farm side and helped restore the farms. The idea that you are building that level of connection between your customers is absolutely fundamental. They are going to become part of your farm business. And you can see here other creative farm products that we produce. Another way of selling herbs and getting higher value. Chopping them up and making compound butters. Another sales avenue that I've developed. Connecting with my CSA members through weekly newsletters. Absolutely essential. Teaching people how to eat. And the most important part. Earlier we were talking about, well, how many hours a week does this spin model involve? Most successful farmers in my area usually work between 80 and 100 hours a week. And that's the normal work week. I usually work about 100 hours a week. Maybe on a really slow week I'd get down to 80. But that is the level of commitment that it takes to try and start this type of business. And especially if you're looking for, achieving the types of things that I've done in a 5-year time period. I put in a lot of time. Pretty much I get up and I work. And that's what I do. I grow, I develop a farm. And it's not only hard work on the farm, but it's hard work in the office, making sure that I keep track of all those things. That's a picture because I am out harvesting with the headlamp. I do a lot of work with the headlamp because there's only so many hours of daylight in the day, and oftentimes I run out of that. Spend a lot of money on AAA batteries, but you get more work for it. Quality first, that's another good shot of the washroom. So, work with the different types of things that you can do to make this system unique. Differentiate your products. And I think I'm out of time. So,
Okay, I got a question. Okay, Nick, so how many farm hands do you have on your farm for you all?
okay, I'll give you, it's varied throughout the history of the farm. My very first year, I actually hired 2 part-time interns. I paid them $8.50 an hour. I had them there for about, say 6 weeks in the middle of summertime when they were off from college. That definitely cut into my revenues, but it also helped me get over the hurdle of, I was building a lot of infrastructure. And I needed people that could be out there doing some of the weeding. The second year of business, I actually cut that down to 1 person and did a lot more of the farm work myself. So I was able to then recoup more of that money. Then in the second year, because I only had 1 person hired and expanded, I was able to pocket about $35,000 in net profit after expenses from the farm. Third year I went into business, I tried to hire a bunch more people, and I may be guilty of working them to death because everybody quit within a couple of weeks. I ended up doing the entire season by myself. Now, this last year, for the first time, I actually had 1 full-time person who worked for me the entire year. Which for me, that's something I'm passionate about doing, is I created a job. I created a job not only that's providing for my family from the farm, but now I'm supporting somebody else. And that's within the farm. On the bakery side of things, there's a lot more labor that goes in, and then the restaurant even more. Between the bakery and the restaurant and the farm, last year, for 2013, I sent out 32 different W-2s.
32. So you have 32 people working?
32 people working for me. Now, in terms of like actual full-time equivalents, it may have been something more in the range of, 6 to 8 full-time people. That's how much.
Entire year?
Yeah, because we're very seasonal because there's few people that live up there, but a lot of tourists that come to visit.
Yeah. Okay. Your cooling system, you said,
Yep.
what was that? How did you do that? Did you build that yourself? Did you, I think you said refrigerator?
I acquired it.
Okay.
So I'm going to build one at some point in time because I won't be able to freeload forever.
Okay.
But I found somebody, and once again, it's being aware of what's in the community. We have a lot of fruit production in our area. Well, when do you harvest your fruits? Maybe, a short period of the year. That cooler I found is available basically 10 months of the year for free because they only use it for a couple of months of the year. And so I took advantage of that, paying a little bit of rent for it, goes towards the electrical bill on the place. That gives me a gigantic cooler that I can use. And for him, it's just a little extra income when it's just sitting empty anyhow. So knowing where you can find resources like that is very important. But I'm working on a complicated geothermal system where I can make my own and run it on very, very little electricity. But if you're doing something to start up with, the CoolBot, if anybody's heard of that, is probably the most efficient economic way to do it. And I would emphasize making it a very, very well insulated structure. And you can go online and actually find used polystyrene foam panels for not that much money to build one.
Is that the one using air conditioning?
Yep, it's an AC unit.
That's not the spin person who wants to come back.
Yeah.
There's carrots in the winter. Can we go back to what you harvest in the snow?
Okay, so the things that I harvest, everything I harvest. So I do a lot of snow, even more than I let on before. So underneath the snow, you can have varied root crops. So I will leave crops under the snow. Carrots and beets are pretty tough. Parsnips are extremely durable. Rutabagas are fairly durable, but not as durable. Turnips can be somewhat sensitive. Potatoes are very durable. Because I have the snow as an insulation barrier, those crops really aren't even freezing. They get some freeze and thaw that happens, but not a lot. Freeze and thaw I want because it makes more sweetness. So I'll leave crops out there that I can go dig. Rutabagas, turnips, beets, carrots, parsnips, even kohlrabi I've done before as just more of a bulk crop. I also leave kale and other hardy greens underneath the snow as well.
When you say leave, it looks like they're in a container. Are you harvesting to put them in the container?
Harvest to put them in the container.
I see.
Yeah, basically I had to dig a hole down through the snow to get to the ground again, and then start pulling the carrots out of the ground. For the most part, I don't dig these root crops because my soil is a no-till production system, and because I never till the soil and I have permanent beds, it gets very, very loose over time, just because of the biological activity I've promoted in the soil, and I actually just grab them and pull them right out of the ground without any shelter. The other crops that I'm doing in the wintertime are other greens outside, and I build these little tunnels. So this is sort of going backwards through it. So salad greens, Swiss chard, spinach is fantastic. That's one of the easiest and the best crops to do. Other hardy greens like claytonia, mosh does very well out there, and kale. I actually harvested kale through most of the wintertime this year without any tunnel covering it because we had enough snow quick enough that it was completely buried. And that insulation barrier preserved the kale and the snow. And I just go back out there because I have a map in my mind where everything is, and I can go out there, pull the snow off, and harvest some fresh greens throughout the winter.
Of course, you don't have a problem with frost lovers doing Illinois.
Yes,
Those
right.
three days.
I have snow. Snow is
Not ice.
insulation.
But the ground don't freeze like it do in Illinois.
No, the ground never freezes, really.
Okay.
He's in zone 6, and
So
we're in zone 5. So he's actually have less temperature. Zone 6 maybe like 20 degrees, 15 degrees as the coldest. Is that right?
It'll still get down to 0. I
Right.
think like your total maximum for zone 6 is like -5 to -10, which I've seen that a couple of times. This one it might get there because the lakes are frozen. But basically, even in this type of environment, you can use simple design a slightly larger tunnel. And if you really want to hold your root crops in there, you can make that tunnel, you can cover that with straw, and then you can wrap that bigger tunnel with another layer of row cover. So then you provide the insulation yourself. Now that's a cost that you have that I wouldn't because I have snow. And then these structures are fairly durable. You can see sort of the finished product. And then that's it. That's what it looks like after it gets covered in snow. And then you can see what it looks like inside, covered in snow.
What kind of material is that?
That's row cover, just agribond. I get it out of St. Joseph's, Michigan. Probably as close, if not closer to you than it is to me. And they have I think it's a 19 ounce is what you see on the inside, and then the stuff that's in contrast with stone is 30 ounce per square foot. It's a little bit tougher. But it breathes. It won't overheat like plastic.
All the water.
It's permeable.
Oh,
It's like it's a spun metal type fabric. Yeah.
yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
I have a question about the geothermal.
Uh-huh.
You just mentioned it in passing, but is that for your house? The geothermal?
It's actually a system instead of geothermal heating, I'm doing geothermal cooling. So I'm building a large ground loop where I have a number of pipes buried out in the ground that circulate, and then that takes the temperature of the glycol solution down, and then it circulates back in, and I use a heat pump to drop it about 8 degrees. And it circulates again, and then it comes back and it goes down another 8 degrees. And by just using the heat pump and then having a heat exchanger so I can take 8 degree, 8 degree, 8 degree increments until I get my water temperature down to, say, in the mid-20s, then I have a cold fluid that I can circulate back through the cooler and run some fans on it, and that keeps the cooler chilled. The idea is that by using the heat pump combined with the geothermal loops that I bury out in the field, it uses about 1/6 the amount of electricity that a regular cooler uses. It's a complicated engineering thing, but fantastic technology. It's an expensive startup, but right now there are, government grants that will kind of pay for the additional expense over, standard system because of the energy savings. So you can, for the cost of a new cooler system, you can put something in like this with the subsidy on it. And then, the major expense going on having a cooler like that is the electrical bill. A big cooler could run you $1,000 a month of electricity. So that's why I'm being really proactive about cutting down that cost. Part of my business planning is what are my fixed expenses every month and how can I reduce those?
Do you have a contractor doing that?
There's another guy that's designed some of this and he's playing around with it, and I'm building my own design, and I think we can maybe even improve things a little bit more.
What's the depth? You have to go down and get that 55 degrees.
I'm shooting in the 6 to 8 foot range. I've got a mini backhoe that I got behind my tractor, and about what I can reach out.
Supposed to be like 55 degrees permanent, that's so many feet down on earth, that was, I don't know.
Well, okay, so part of what happens is it is generally more permanent temperature at that depth. But because of this geothermal loop, over time I'm actually making that even much colder. Because over time, that whole solution of that system is going to be dropping into the mid-20s because I'm cooling with that heat. When it comes out of the ground, it goes into that loop. And actually over time, the one guy's place that looked at this, he actually froze a giant block out of this field. Like, going through the summer, he just got this big frozen chunk out there. Yeah.
So how do you water them?
How do I water? Let me get a picture of that. Okay, so I irrigate very heavily with drip tape. That's a very efficient and precise way for me to deliver the water. Because of the sandy soil, I've found that I don't have as complete uniform distribution right at the top of the germination bed. So I've set up a dual system. So I have an overhead system and I have a drip system. And I use the overhead system for germination. That gives me a super high level of germination uniformity because I can get that distribution. Because when I'm planting out here, I'm planting this based on like 2-inch by 3/4 inch tight spacing levels. So I need to be precise, really within a quarter inch in order for my system to work with the irrigation. So the drip irrigation is great because as soon as the crops are irrigated, their roots are in the soil and they can get the water that's coming off the drip irrigators. Before that, I like to have for the direct seeded crops an overhead system. And I use that very heavily even in the middle of the day on hot summer days, and I can produce fantastic salad greens, not only in the spring and the fall and in the winter, but mid-heat in the summertime. And the sprinkler I use is called Mini Welty. It's a very nice design. It only has 3 total parts. Very little that can go wrong with it, one orifice.
A mini what?
Wobbler.
Wow.
So you got pipes running underground, you got popping up about every 50 feet.
Yeah, about every 20 feet. They don't cover much diameter. Because if I have too much spacing, then I'll get wind deformation on my irrigation pattern that can blow it around, and that messes up the uniformity.
So you got a pump that's working city pressure, whatever.
Well water. And I have one field that I have an irrigation pond, but most of my plots are hooked to that well, so I run it off.
That sounds pressure, 32.
Yeah, the mini wobbler will actually run pretty decent all the way down to 20 or even high teens of pressure. It does pretty well.
It's pressure.
Yeah.
How much total acreage do you farm a year and how much do you make?
Okay, so I don't have my final numbers tallied for 2013 yet because I've got a few new projects, but the 2012 was 0.62 acres, and I produced $57,000 worth of product, and after all of my expenses, I took home about $45,000, and that was just myself.
And how much space was actually growing?
My percentage. In terms of subtracting my walkways? No, that's including my walkways and my growing bed. That's 0.62 acres would have been.
Point 0.62 acres?
A little over half acre.
A little bit over a half acre.
Yeah. Yeah.
$50,000.
Yeah.
45. Yeah.
I might have missed it when I stepped out, but did you have to come up with some creative financing to get your seeds and your land and everything else?
CSA.
CSA?
Yep. So I started the CSA, and that got me my initial chunk of seed money.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is your primary outlet CSA?
Yes. Most of my vegetable sales go to the CSA. Even now, I'm expanding other markets, farmers markets. Some limited wholesale. One of the major projects I'm doing now is actually farm-to-school sales. As much because I'm passionate about trying to get better food into our schools, as the fact that it's not a terribly high margin market for me, but if I can do it and get good food into the schools, I'm going to make it happen. Yeah.
So with your CSA, how often do you have to deliver? Is it weekly or monthly?
Weekly. I have weekly pickups and weekly deliveries. And just depending on, part of how you run your CSA needs to fit in with your work model. My work model is more based around the idea that I get up at 2 a.m. and I work and I harvest and I deliver at 6:30 a.m. 5 days a week. And so I like to have CSA deliveries 5 days a week because I'm done with my harvest and my delivery every day by about 8 a.m. and then I can go back to more other work. Some people like to have entire days blocked out a week for harvest and then other days blocked out for field work. It just depends what sort of works for your farm. So I have multiple different pickup options throughout the week, and some people, it's better for them just to do 1 or 2 days a week.
If you don't mind me asking,
Yeah.
how much does CSA?
Okay, so I price my CSA, and pricing your CSA is very critical. Don't price it too low to start with because your members are never going to want to pay more later. So make sure you start out at the high enough level and the right kind of level. So I have what I call, the people do shares and full shares and half shares. What I have is I have a cream of the crop share. That sounds good. That's what you want, right? And the cream of the crop share is $350 for 12 weeks of food. Then we have the Tastes of the Garden share, which that's a sampling. That's going to get you in. You're going to get a few vegetables. You're going to get connected with it. That's $200 for 12 weeks. Then I also have an herbivore share, which is a greens only share. That's $150 for 12 weeks. And then I've got options. $48 for eggs, $48 for bread. You get through the cream of the crop share, you're already getting the eggs and the bread. And that's kind of my breakdown of the pricing structure. I I did a lot of work last winter with the International CSA Farming Group, and a lot of the people that I found sort of nationally and internationally, they're finding like about a $22 a week amount of vegetables is kind of what people are wanting to get through a CSA box. I'm finding in our area, I can push that to maybe $30 a week worth of vegetables even. I'm looking at having maybe even a bigger share with the vegetables. And that's kind of a good ballpark for what people are going to want to consume. Yeah.
How many types of vegetables would you have in that package?
Okay, so when I make the package,
Yeah.
I fill the bag based entirely on what I have available and what the current going market rates are at farmers markets. If you buy the cream of the crop share, I'll probably put 10% extra in. The other shares I won't. So what I'll do is I'll start with a list of products I have. And say I put a bag of salad mix for $5. I put a bunch of carrots for $3. I put a bag of potatoes for $5. I put head of bok choy for $2. And what I'm doing is I'm putting those things in the bag is I'm assigning them a value. And when I get to my $29.67 that they paid for it, then I know I have the right amount of quantity in the share. And so some weeks I have a lot of different things, because maybe it's a head of romaine or a bunch of this and they're not high dollar items, so you might have 10 things. Some weeks you might have 7 or 8 items because they're worth more per item.
Okay, would it be feasible also that you sit down with this group, like I've got a group that really wants to, they're waiting for you to start growing.
Yep.
So you sit down with them and figure out what they want you to grow. for them.
Absolutely. I actually try to keep surveys going out to my members so I can get feedback. What did you like? What didn't you like? And then I'm trying to evolve the CSA share so I can better match what their preferences are. Sitting down with them beforehand is fantastic. I know people that they hold very intensive, before the CSA begins, membership education. They learn about you, you learn about them, and it helps you get off on the right foot.
Do you also in the package things that you grow and produce?
Okay, so
You don't go out anywhere else?
I almost exclusively grow and produce everything that's in my shares. The exception has been over the last year and a half, I butchered all my laying hens, and so I've found 2 other farmers that are growing the eggs for me, and that's something where when I do that, instead of me getting $48 for a share for eggs, I just give that money to the other farmer. But I also, and in terms of, if it's my CSA, I want it to be my product for the most part. When I have time, I'm going to build another laying operation and have eggs back in there for me. I also work together and put together a farmer cooperative where we have multiple farms creating a customized, pick your own box every week type system. So it's a lot of people buying in from multiple different farms to produce a weekly pickup box. And that's something you can also coordinate. But I personally like to have the direct connection between the food that I produce and the person who's eating it. And so if I'm doing that under